97.3 ESPN.com Eagles Insider, also covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. And John, I wanted to start talking about this Le'Veon Bell situation. It is so bizarre because this guy's already been in trouble a couple times, and then he just is not available for his drug test. Is this a maturity issue, or is this guy just real trouble?
It could be a little bit of both. It's certainly a maturity issue, though. There's no question about that. I mean, he knows the situation he's in, and he understands the penalty of the fact that he doesn't show up for those tests. Unlike the personal conduct policy, which a lot of people complain about, and understandably so as far as players go, the substance abuse policy, it's clearly spelled out as far as what the penalties are, and if you don't do this, you're going to get this. And the fact that Le'Veon Bell is now up to 4 games, it tells you he's failed multiple tests, in this case missed them, which counts as a failure. And all of a sudden, you start thinking about the future and the fact that he's in the final year of his rookie contract. He's talked about wanting to be the highest paid running back in football. And if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers, how can you do that? The next hit is 10 games, and after that, it's a Martavis Bryant situation where he's suspended indefinitely. And he's shown no indication that he can stay away from marijuana. And as I always tell people, it's not a moral judgment from a football organization's perspective. It's a business decision, and the fact that, and Bell's a perfect example because he's a tremendous player. Nobody doubts that. Nobody questions it. But if he can't be on the field for you, what good is he? And this is not a difficult testing system to pass, Josh. There are dozens and dozens and dozens of NFL players who use marijuana and never get in any trouble with the NFL because it's basically an IQ test to pass the one opportunity you have to get tested, which takes place in the offseason.
John, don't they let you know way ahead of time, too? They schedule it with you.
Well, they don't let you know way ahead of time, but you know the dates that it's going to be. Okay. And you know as soon as you get tested, it's over. You're good to go until next year. So, in other words, if you don't get tested in mini camp or you don't get tested in OTA, then you're going to have to wait for the first few days of training camp. And then once you do it, you're good to go. You're golden. So when people feel sorry for the Le'Veon Bells of the world, or you name it, Josh Gordon, Justin Blackmon, Martavis Bryant, understand these are people that have failed multiple tests time and time again. So it's when they redid the substance abuse policy, they made the original penalty for getting caught with marijuana just a warning. Then it goes to a fine. Then you start the suspensions. So we're talking multiple failed tests here or as I said in this case, missed tests. So no one should feel sorry for a player like Le'Veon Bell.
John, I want to ask you about the Steelers because this is Le'Veon Bell. It's basically his third we know of situation he's had. You mentioned Martavis Bryant. This is a respectable organization, John. I mean, this is considered one of the top class-run organizations of the last few decades, and yet they're having all these troubles. You know, how much of this is a bit of a damage to the Steelers as an organization, optics-wise?
Well, I think it is optics-wise, but I think this is a problem throughout the NFL, and I think people in the sport understand that. It's more of a generational thing, and I wrote about it today on today's Pigskin. It's going to go up this afternoon, but the fact of the matter is we're dealing with a younger generation that doesn't think there's anything wrong with smoking marijuana, and that's fine. But by the rules of the NFL, collectively bargained by the players themselves, they can't do it. And if they get caught, they get these types of suspensions. So, but if you're an organization like the Pittsburgh Steelers and you think about the hits they've taken and the fact that Bryant is a tremendous player, he's gone for the entire season. Le'Veon Bell, from a football sense, he can argue he's the best running back in football. He's certainly the most versatile as far as being a great runner, a great receiver, a capable pass protector. He can do it all. So from that, this was one of the best offenses in football. When you think about Ben Roethlisberger and Antonio Brown and Marcus Wheaton, but all of a sudden, a potential Super Bowl contender is knocked off because these knuckleheads can't stop smoking weed for a couple months. And it gets frustrating for an organization. The Steelers are hardly the only ones dealing with it, and everybody in this league holds their breath.
We're talking with John McMullen. You can follow him at JF McMullen on Twitter. He covers the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com and covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. John, I want to transition to another player. He's not for suspensions, but, you know, when the news came out about J.J. Watt and his back surgery, the timing of it is very problematic for the Texans because this is a guy, John, that gets double and triple teamed, and even if he misses 1 or 2 games, the pressure that he takes from opposing teams having the game plan for him allows his teammates to roam freely and do their jobs. And if he's not around, to me, who knows how long he's going to be out? Because back surgery is a serious thing. This isn't just something, this isn't like, you know, getting your appendix taken out or something.
Yeah, I mean, the Texans are trying to paint it as positively, optimistically as possible, saying he'll be back for week 1. That's a hope anytime you're dealing with back surgery. And we think it's the herniated disc. Remember, J.J. played last year. Think about this, Josh. He had a broken hand.
Sure.
He had a herniated disc in his back. He had 5 muscle tears in his core and his groins.
Let's not forget the triceps injury, too.
Yeah, and he was Defensive Player of the Year with 17.5 sacks. So I think a lot of people just, you know, look at him, say he looks like Superman, nothing's going to hurt him. But this is a guy that was banged up. He talked about it earlier this offseason, and he mentioned he doesn't think the fans realize how difficult last season was on his body. And he takes incredible care of himself, obviously. I do think he'll make it back. I'm not sure if he'll make it back by week 1. But now, all of a sudden, this is an industry that everybody has a short shelf life in. And the bottom line is the injuries are piling up on the guy, and it's a concern moving forward because, as you mentioned, back issues are very, very tricky. And we've seen it with Tony Romo playing the quarterback position. They could crop up at any time. And certainly, as you mentioned, all the attention J.J. Watt gets as far as double teams and as far as people trying to take shots and chips and doing everything they can to stop him, this is a concern for the Texans because obviously that defense is the strength of their team.
John, I also want to ask you about the passing of Dennis Green. To me, it's overlooked the fact that, you know, we all remember, you know, they are who we thought they were speech, but this is a guy who was really on the cutting edge as a coach. He was one of the first African-American coaches at the Division I level at Northwestern and Stanford, and then he came to the NFL, and he basically made a Vikings organization that had fallen on tough times become respectable, and, you know, they dominated the 90s. You know, if you could talk a little bit about Denny Green's impact on the NFL.
Yeah, great coach. Doesn't get as much credit as he deserved. My first beat job in this league was covering Denny Green with the Vikings, and I think his legacy would have changed if they won in '98 when they were the best team, and Gary Anderson had the perfect year, and all of a sudden misses the field goal in the NFC Championship game. It was just another heart-wrenching loss for that franchise, that organization. But I think it changes. People don't realize Tony Dungy came from the Dennis Green tree. He was his defensive coordinator. Brian Billick was his offensive coordinator. They both go on to win Super Bowls, obviously. And I think if he won in '98, he would be one of the coaching giants. People would talk about him as a Hall of Fame coach. He was that good. And his tree turned out to be tremendous. And now, sort of Tony Dungy, it shifted to him being the first African-American head coach to win a Super Bowl. in a lot of ways, and Tony will say it himself, Denny should have been the first, probably deserved to be the first, but unfortunately life isn't fair at times. And people who cover this league know how good he was. Jerry Rice was speaking today. Back in San Francisco, before Dennis got his first job, he was Jerry's wide receiver coach, and Rice gives him all the credit in the world for developing him from a small school college star and the best receiver of all time. That's the kind of respect he had around the league.
We'll be talking with John McMullen. You can follow him at JF McMullen on Twitter. John, one more thing before I let you go. You look at all the issues that people are having, the Steelers with Le'Veon Bell, the Texans with J.J. Watt, and then, of course, we know about the accusations about Ezekiel Elliott with the Cowboys, but you got three teams in the NFC East who are sitting back on a Friday and saying, I'm glad that's not us. The Eagles, the Giants, and the Redskins, they're looking pretty clean going into camp right now.
Yeah, they are. Well, the Eagles had the issue with Nelson Aguilar, but that was cleaned up as we expected it would be. And he'll be at camp. Obviously, he'll have to answer some questions as far as his decision-making. But I think that'll quickly blow over. It'll move on. And we'll see if he can develop into a contributor in his second season. But I've written about it in the past with the Cowboys. I mean, the Cowboys just have to start taking red flags more seriously. That's the bottom line. It happens to every team, and sometimes it's bad luck. But when you consistently take chances on players, and we've seen the number of suspensions. Remember, DeMarcus Lawrence is gone for the first month. Randy Gregory is gone for the first month. Rolando McClain is suspended for 10 games. So that's three of their starting front seven that's not going to be there for a month. And in McClain's, he's not going to be there for over half the season. So Jerry's done it again and again. Jerry Jones did it with Greg Hardy. That didn't work out. And there were some whispers about Ezekiel Elliott before the draft. Most of it had to do with party drugs. Nobody knew about the domestic violence thing. But you have to start taking it more seriously. And that's the bottom line for the Dallas Cowboys.
Make sure you follow him at JF McMullen on Twitter. He covers the Eagles for 97.3 ESPN.com. And, of course, he covers the NFL for today's Pigskin. John, looking forward to start talking to you more as the Eagles, they're back in camp next week.
Yeah, it really creeps up on you, Josh. And unfortunately, the opening days of camp coincide with the Democratic National Convention. So it is going to be a circus in South Philadelphia.
I suggest, John, you plan for an extra hour to your travel time.
Yes, at least. At least.
Have a good weekend, my friend.
Thank you, Jeff.